All right, we are back. Peanut Gallery. We're doing Heckling from the Heart. Camera, take it away.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about this. I want you to be involved in this conversation a little bit, too, because I think it's important for us to talk about the fact that I think that the new war has officially begun. And I'm not talking about, like, NXT versus AEW on Wednesday nights, because, again, like I said, that was just the warm-up in the previous segment. I think right now the war has actually begun, and there are a couple of indicators that tell me that the actual war has begun, and that coincides with certain properties being bought out, like what happened with Tony Khan, with Ring of Honor, with the and I'm going to talk about like the very real war that is now happening between WWE and I'm not going to call it AEW because at this point it's not even about AEW. It's just about Tony Khan and company Tony Khan and company.
Tony Khan is Empire.
Yeah, his Empire.
He's made an empire of wrestling. It's not just about AEW at this point.
Yeah, it's not. It's AEW, it's Ring of Honor, and I think that he'll probably make a bid for Impact Wrestling at some point in time. I wouldn't be surprised if he made a bid for Impact Wrestling. But he's building for himself a little fiefdom, which heavily favors people on his roster, which we've talked about during Ring of Honor's
Supercard of Honor
show. And I think that it's only going to get worse. And there are a couple of, like I said, there are indicators. I think one of the most looked over indicators is the fact that now the owners of these companies, whether it be Tony Khan or Vince McMahon, they're starting to get a little more involved in storylines. And let's talk about Mr. McMahon's involvement in storylines with his WrestleMania match, or if you want to call it a match, but I think that this is a reaction to what is really happening behind the scenes. And the war that is happening right now is not about Nielsen ratings. It's not about a direct head-to-head competition because the 90s are a different era in professional wrestling.
Hell, even early 2000s are a different era. People's like, oh, I actually had an argument with this. I'm like, do you not realize that 2000 was 20 plus years ago? People don't realize how much time has progressed.
Right.
Like, it's crazy to think. Like, ECW's last year was 2001. That was like 11 years ago. No, that was 21 years ago. That was
22 years ago. We're in 2022 now.
It's insane to think of. Like, people like, oh, I think a lot of people's minds are still stuck within the early 2000s. They don't want to accept that. Like, I mean, Peanut Gallery and I are almost in our fucking 30s.
Yeah. But so the war that's happening right now is not about head-to-head. It's not about the Nielsen ratings. It's not about that anymore. And I get it. A lot of the dirt sheets, your Dave Meltzers, your Wade Kellers of the world, they're going to look at those numbers, right?
Yep.
But it's not about those numbers anymore.
Nope.
It's about the overall media, whether it's social media, TikTok, YouTube,
it's about
Twitter,
media attention.
Facebook. Right. It's all about the media attention now. So wrestling companies are adapting towards all forms of media.
Right. WWE has crushed it.
They are. They're getting more views, even though their ratings technically have gone down. And we're going to talk about that as a separate issue. Yep. Because
that'd actually be a great topic for next week.
Because the network execs are pulling a lot of strings. They're pulling more strings now. They're pulling more weight now than they did in the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era, like, here you go. Here's some TV time. Go hog wild. Now, the networks have a lot of say with these contracts.
Right. But the problem is that WWE is showing record profits where it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want the profitable company or do you want the good wrestling show?
But again, I think this is a great topic for next week because I think that the media companies are looking at things a little bit differently than what's actually happening on the ground.
WWE is not a wrestling company.
I'm going to look at
They're a media conglomerate.
Again, Tiger, I'm going to look at what's happening on the ground with WWE.
Well, that's what's happening.
So you have the owners of these companies are starting to be a little more involved than they have been during the, quote, Wednesday Night Wars. Because, Tony Khan was hardly ever on TV or anything like that, but now it's all of a sudden just everywhere.
Right.
I mean, hell, he was on TV like 4 or 5 times in the last week. He wants to get the eyes on him. He was at a UFC event on Saturday,
Now, obviously, what we're talking about was way before, so hindsight is 2020.
Right.
I didn't even know Tony Khan was at the UFC event last Saturday.
Or I guess it was yesterday, technically.
It was technically yesterday because
it was
Sunday.
in Jacksonville. But the point is that
I thought he was here in Vegas.
the point is that a lot of the owners of the companies are going to be more involved, and that's the first big indicator.
Right.
So moving on to the second big indicator of what's happening is we got to talk about this because Tony Khan.
I made a joke about this on my TikTok, and a lot of people were upset about it. It's like, this is a bunch of crap. Tony Khan, bless his heart, he should not be on social media, period.
Well, it's all part of the game for him, though. I think he did this as part of the game.
I think he's being I think at the end of the day he is actually being kind of strategic because now people are talking about it.
Yep.
Keep in mind of how many people are talking about this. It's like, look what happened with Big Swole.
Yeah.
It's like, she wasn't good. I mean, I actually agreed with Tony Khan at that point.
Yeah, she wasn't very good.
She wasn't good. So that's why it wasn't about representation. It's like, that's stupid. Because obviously there was a lot of people within the AEW community. They're very much on, are you pulling ratings? Pull ratings, you're on TV. Look at the Acclaim. They're on every show. You know why? Because people talk about Max Caster and his raps. Like,
Right.
come on.
But they're not talking about it. It's not
An independent study. Where are your numbers for this independent study?
But again, it's not about the TV numbers. It's about the social media numbers. That's where it matters almost more than TV. Because, my fucking God, when was the last time we watched a cable show?
Right. Hey, Tony Khan, just an FYI, because I know you watch our show, by the way. That's why you have me blocked on Twitter now. But in an independent study, Peanut Gallery and I have definitely figured out your con, and we can figure it out, pun intended, we can figure out your shit 10 steps ahead of you. And this is not in any signal boosting rating, but this is an independent study. So
It's not very independent. It's almost as independent as Dave Meltzer is. Let's be real here.
I was making a joke.
I know. Then it's almost as independent as Dave Meltzer is.
Yeah, but we're not biased here. I don't care how much somebody pays us, but we try to be as transparent with everything that we do as possible.
Yeah.
And I think most of our fans know this.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we're right.
Right.
90% of the time.
At the day,
we're right.
Right. We could be on the right side of it. But the point is that a lot of what's going on right now is very purposeful because they are starting this. Like, the war has actually started.
Right.
Like, there are really big things happening. There are really big things moving, and that's another thing I want to talk about. Moving on to the next slide.
Also, Tony Khan, we're real people. So,
let's talk a little bit about the dirt sheets. Like, is he paying the dirt sheets or not?
I think so. I think he's 100% paying them off. I think that some of the matches that they've given 5 stars to, now, credit. There are some matches within AEW that have been absolutely memorable. And there are pay-per-views within AEW that I am legitimately more excited about than any other pay-per-view that I have seen with WWE in the last 10 years other than WrestleMania. But that's because of WrestleMania, and I love WrestleMania. But I think there's something to this to where it's a little bit sketch. And I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to that.
Like, I get it. Tony Khan's the new guy in the block. Right? And granted, all the pay-per-views been exciting, but we've been talking about this over the past couple of weeks now where there's a formula for AEW shows. In that, one of the biggest problems is that you can only hire so many people.
Now they're starting to release people like Leo Rush, Joey Janela. They're starting to wean out people who aren't making them money. I'm sorry, Leo Rush isn't pulling people, and Joey Janela never has. And I was sitting there wondering why they did that. I was like, oh, what about Danhausen? Yeah, but the problem is Danhausen it actually pulls people to watch the show.
But Danhausen had a shelf life, but that's another story.
He has a shelf life, but it hasn't run out yet.
Yeah, that's another story for another day.
It hasn't run out yet.
But again, another story for another day.
Right.
But what I'm going to talk about is the fact that all of this, and I think there's a feedback loop with this. There's praise given by, quote, reputable news sources. And then the fans are like, ooh, reputable news sources say he's the best, so I'm going to watch more of his shit. And
then they're disappointed. I'm sorry.
There's that feedback loop now.
I look at the social media, and we get attacks from a lot of these diehards. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like they want it to be as good as WWE. But in reality, they're kind of not.
You remember when Tony Khan was going to pull a pay-per-view quality show last week, but it didn't really happen?
Exactly.
Because it drew really low numbers.
I watch both shows. I watch it every week.
Right.
And it's like only other than one match, which was the FTR match, the rest of the show was entirely forgettable.
Yeah.
100% forgettable. And you can say whatever you want, but next week you're not going to remember a damn thing other than the Young Bucks and FTR match. Because that was the only match that was memorable.
Right.
Have more of that, and you're going to win. Right. WWE has WrestleMania. I don't care how bad it is. It's WrestleMania.
You're gonna remember Stone Cold Steve Austin. You're gonna remember Vince McMahon. You're gonna remember Cody fucking Rhodes, and that brings me to another point.
Why is Cody Rhodes there? Great
Cody
timing.
Rhodes.
He went back to
He's in the WWE.
He was an executive vice president, and he went back to there.
Went back to WWE.
Now, we obviously don't know the entire extent of why he went back to WWE. We don't know. At the end of the day, there was only a handful of people who will truly know why.
Right.
And we will never know the extent of that. But at the end of the day, Cody Rhodes, as an executive vice president, and who made it a clear indication that WWE is not it, showed up at WrestleMania and the Raw preceding it.
So
there's an obvious thing there.
And guess what? Cody Rhodes may have been the first wrestler to jump from AEW to WWE.
He ain't going to be the last.
He is not going to be the last.
Of somebody who made his entire thing of hating everything WWE. He did entrances that were legitimately a shot at WWE. I can see Chris Jericho, Christian Cage, Kenny Omega,
MJF.
MJF is even stated. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
WWE wants MJF. I wouldn't be surprised.
And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future episode where the networks are getting involved in that.
Oh, and watch us be right because we're not fucking stupid.
But the point is now there's going to be an exchange. There's going to be a real exchange of talents going on.
Mm-hmm.
AEW is no longer going to just poach talent from WWE. Now WWE is going to be fighting back.
Yep.
That is another very clear indication that the war has really begun. Because you can say, "Oh, the Wednesday Night Wars," but there wasn't this level of
that was a battle to the war that's going to be proceeding over the next. I wouldn't say a couple of months. I would say a year.
Oh, years. It's going to be many years of battle back and forth between these two companies.
Right, because you know why? Because AEW has money backing them.
And so does WWE.
Right. There is money backing both of them. There's billions of dollars that are backing both of them.
You wanted a war, this is the war.
And the thing is that AEW is independently solvent. They support themselves without outside backers.
And now, again, this is why it's different than the WCW days, but the premise is the same.
Also, just the entire everything right now, given a lot of other outside things like political power, influence, what's going to be happening within current stratas is much different now than it even was back then.
Right.
It's a lot more prevalent. Yeah. So we really don't know up until, I'll be honest with you, and I hate saying this, but the presidential election in 2024 is really going to kind of determine a lot of this stuff because WWE and AEW are so powerful in that aspect.
I don't want to go that far. That's way far outside of what I'm talking about now.
Maybe prelims? Because I think there was a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of political influence and political decisions.
I'm not talking like actual politics. I'm talking like insider politics.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about over-escaping politics.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with what's going on right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more than you want to admit.
No, wrestling is not going to influence presidential elections.
Oh, influence not going to influence presidential elections. It never did. But the presidential elections is going to influence wrestling. Especially at this level.
What do you mean? Again, another conversation.
It'll be another conversation. Maybe once again another great topic for another day.
Again, I'm just talking about the fact that the real war has started.
Right. No. Inside influences without the outside politics within it. Cody Rhodes showing up at WrestleMania is the first big shot.
That is like the outsiders going to WCW level of like.
No, Hulk Hogan going to WCW.
Well, I'm talking like early days because we're very early.
Hulk Hogan went in there before.
Oh, he did? I wasn't aware of that.
Oh no, Hulk Hogan was already WCW champion a couple of times before the outsiders were even there.
Or even like Lex Luger or something.
Oh no, Hulk Hogan was already champion before that.
Oh really? Okay.
Oh wait, no,
I'm just talking like very early.
Hulk Hogan signed his contract on the debut of WCW Nitro.
I mean, like I said, I was talking like way early. But
yeah, no, that's way early. Now, way early WCW.
But
not Jim Crockett Promotions. There's a big difference between those.
But I'm talking like shots have been fired.
Oh, this is shots have been fired.
Yeah.
This is a big moment of what's going to be happening next.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, WWE can sign your Keith Lees, sign your whatevers, sign your Drew McIntyres,
sign your Keith Lees. Well, let me talk a little bit more about that whole debacle.
Sign your Roman Reigns and let's talk.
Right.
This is signing your Roman Reigns right here.
Yeah.
He's an executive vice president. This is signing your Roman Reigns.
And he wasn't like okay.
He wasn't big on screen, but off screen.
Yeah. But
let's sign your Chris Jericho's and see what happens.
You're signing your Miz's and let's see what happens.
Exactly.
Because the Miz might not be the biggest star. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that you wanted a war. This is what war is about. You're gonna get both sides of the conversation involved.
You're gonna get heavy hitters leaving one, leaving the other. Now because now we're starting to see we're seeing cracks within the AEW wall.
Yeah.
Now.
So AEW is still a great wrestling product. I'm not gonna discount how great its wrestling product is, but the honeymoon is over.
Yep, I agree with you.
Now the bloodbath begins to show.
This is where you nut up or shut up sort of thing. And if you can't produce a product that's going to be ratings winners day after day after day, you're going to see your MJFs leave. You're going to see your Darby Allins leave. You're going to see a lot of these people say bye.
Right. And the other thing I want to mention too is not about the TV ratings at this point.
The TV ratings are nothing.
At this point, you got to look at engagement over the entire spectrum of content.
It's profitability, and profitability does not necessarily mean advertising revenue.
Right.
Because now, advertising revenue is a big portion that you don't have to worry about, but at the same time, we see a lot of wrestling companies who still make a profit and are very good that don't really have a big TV product. And I personally will be talking about that here in a hot ass minute.
Right.
But at the same time, these are heavy hitters.
Yeah.
And AEW, despite my feelings of them now and their wrestling fans, trust me, as a political figure who actually criticizes AEW, we get it. But we understand that this is a big opportunity for WWE. We don't want these guys to shut down. We want them to be better.
But this is an actual competition now.
Right. This is actual competition that we don't want to see gone. But I'm sorry. When something is bad, we're going to say that it's bad.
Okay. And the last point I want to make, too, is don't just look at what the wrestling companies are doing. Look at what the networks are doing.
This
Look at what the management teams
Right.
inside of the WWE are doing, not just the actual product on screen.
Unlike pro wrestling in the 90s, these are businesses.
Yes.
And you have to look at everything from team morale to the moves that each other company is making.
And the moves that the networks request. Because
Right.
the networks are requesting certain things to happen.
Exactly.
And you better bet your bottom dollar that these wrestling companies are going to listen to what the networks are telling them to do.
And also, one company has more and more political power to make that happen.
We're not going to talk about the political stuff.
I know, but one has both to really make those moves happen, and that's not AEW. At the end of the day,
well, I'm going to disagree with you on politics because politics has nothing to do.
it might be that might be a fun debate for next week. So when we come back, I will be talking about some wrestling lesson, and what we're going to be talking about are promotion revival shows, and we have a couple of different things to talk about there, so we'll talk about that when we come back.